Hello, thanks for tuning in, and today we'll continue with Chapter 2 for Nerus. Before we go to the next story, I want to go to the extras, to the glossary. This popped up once we finished Chapter 1 and went into Chapter 2. So I'm not going to go all of them right now, but I'm just going to go on the main ones, the six sisters. The mysterious unancient race, as their name indicates, all of them count with magic that allows them to modify their physical appearance at will. They serve the aeons and were led by what some parties often refer to as the first sacred phenomenon. Their souls used to persist after death and have enough power to build their bodies over time, allowing them to resurrect their memories and personalities intact. Due to this, most of them have lived for long enough to start longing for death. In the worst cases, shapeshifters who lost faith in their cause entered an existential despair so great they eventually ceased all thought, becoming hollow husks. Some were able to stay afloat by looking for other, simpler tasks to devote themselves to. While they thought themselves noble under Nominal's leadership, mortals grew afraid of them due to the destruction they left behind in their search for Nerus. The shapeshifters typically thought of mortals or Hello. Today we're going to continue with Chapter 2 for Nerus. Before we go to the next story, we'll go to the extras. And go up to the shapeshifters. There's different information on the terms and the myths in the game, so I'm not going to go all of them right now, but I'm going to go over a few of them. A mysterious unancient race, as their name indicates, all of them come with magic that allows them to modify their physical appearance at will. They serve the aeons and were led by what some parties often refer to as the first sacred phenomenon. Their souls used to persist after death and to have enough power to rebuild their bodies over time, allowing them to resurrect their memories and personalities intact. However, due to this, most of them have lived for long enough to start longing for death. In the worst cases, shapeshifters who lost faith in their cause entered existential despair so great they eventually ceased all thought, becoming hollow husks. Some were able to stay afloat by looking for other simpler tasks to devote themselves to. While they thought themselves noble under Nominal's leadership, mortals grew afraid of them due to the destruction they left behind in their search for Nerus. The shapeshifters typically thought of mortals and other matter-based creatures as inferior and expendable. Although they have the same physical needs as most mortals, for them these are purely psychological. Thus, they think of them as small hassles they are forced to deal with. So, guess that kind of explains why Nominal apparently had no regard at all for the lives that were destroyed during the wars he caused. Shapeshifters will Nominal anyway, I think he considered morals being feeling expendable. So it was no big deal for him that so much human life got destroyed, and that the fact that it caused humanity to revert back in time technologically from an advancing civilization to a primitive one. So, now, due to their nature, these systems might look very different from each other. They all have one thing in common: a base form, what they call the true shape of the soul. For Nerus, this would be the white wolf appearance he usually wears. They can only modify their appearance based on this form, and the amount of changes they can do depends on the individual. For example, Nerus can't grow any smaller than 2 meters and have changed the color of his irises or get rid of his canine features. What he can do is grow larger, change the coloration of his sclera and fur, and replace his flesh with more of the bone-like material. While this might seem rather limited, he is skilled at what they call special shape shifting, which allows him to combine his combinations with other kinds of matter in order to improve his physical and magical abilities. On the other hand, Sats could shape shift regularly into a greater variety of forms, but didn't gain any significant boost in power by doing so. A rather obscure form of shape shifting is matter shifting. While useless when it comes to changing one's appearance, it allows the user to modify the properties of their body. For instance, one could become stretchy as rubber or stick as gum. All shape shifters do this at a small scale, but those who specialize in this are aware. One more. While Naono stood at the top, technically speaking, the highest rank a shapeshifter could obtain was that of a great shapeshifter. According to Naono, they were the first ones to emerge and the purest, most powerful they can. The ones that spawned after turned out to be much weaker due to them falling too far from the light, thus being born soiled. Their main duty was to uphold Naono's law and act as motivators for lesser shapeshifters so they wouldn't go hollow. Below them were the Warpers, highly regarded for their magic that made the shapeshifters interplanetary reach possible. Shapeshifters were always looking for new Warpers to recruit. Next were the Trackers, capable of monitoring the state of the soul, which allowed them to track lost souls lacking a body, or identify certain niche places once those started appearing. Most of them were just doctors or researchers. Nominal is speculated to be a tracker based on what little has been seen from his magic. Finally, there were the nobles, who were closer with the great shapeshifters in order to acquire great numbers of novices. Alternatively, they were to secure resources to satisfy bodily needs of their classes, food, water, and housing. The rest of shapeshifters worked under the nobles with varying tasks depending on the methods and tasks of the noble they served. Okay, so we learned quite a bit about shapeshifters, how they stay still in their hierarchy. In the next video, we'll continue looking through more of these, like the amnesia, about the Aeon, demons, and angels, and okay, so this everything we've done so far in chapter 2. We've done this and this and these 3. So we're about to do these three now. I think so. Like last time, I started from left and went right. So I'm gonna do that again. Gonna start with this and go right. So this should be like a continuation of Body's story and how he became Alicia's guardian. And initializing playback. A shout rang out, followed by shattering glass, shouting in the steps of heavy boots. The officers broke into the living room, knocking down a vase of a small nearby table. The water spread through the colorful carpet, especially on officers' boots as they came in to apprehend the suspect. One of them chuckled on the crocodile lying on the other side of the room. Heavens, are you alright? Yes. The crocodile rolled over and his eyes trailed off through the hole in the window. Let's get out of here. The officer gave Body a hand and congratulated him for solving the crime. He commented about how persuasive the culprit had been when manipulating the witnesses' testimonies, but Body wasn't in the mood for recount, so after a while he excused himself to go get his pay from the client and started making his way home. He hoped to make it back at a reasonable time to go to bed. Body closed the door behind him with a sigh. He was welcomed by a messy living room. There were crumpled pieces of paper, books, empty bottles, and some tools such as hammers, knives, and rulers scattered all over the floor. Most of the table was occupied by a mock-up of the crime scene he had been investigating, made with a store-bought mini construction set. The crocodile liked taking notes and creating a visual aid to the crime solving from home, even if he made a mess in the process. Hell, I'll just clean it up later. That was what he said every time before heading to the kitchen, kicking whatever obstacle lying his way. He was planning to reheat some chicken he had prepared earlier that day to accompany it with hard bread. Then he'd fall into sleep in the bed and sleep soundly. After a few minutes, he returned with his plate of food. However, before he could sit down and relax, he noticed an envelope on the ground near the front door. He moved the mock-up just enough to place a plate on the table and went to pick the letter up. He recognized the writing on it. It was from the police officer that gave him reports and answered the situation. How strange. He usually sends me letters on Mondays. Something must have happened for him to send this to me urgently. And that could only mean a few things. On another side, the crocodile took the letter and read through it as he munched his dinner down. It seemed like he would need to tie his place up after all. Body looked back at the little girl whose hand he was holding. There she was, pouting and gripping one of her backpack straps. The crocodile let go of the fistful of his keys, and the girl immediately tried to run away. He caught her backpack with his other hand, stopped her in her tracks, and opened the door. There we go, come in. Lisa tried to free herself from the scaling hand. Unable to do so unwillingly to abandon her backpack, she looked down and did as instructed. She had been like this during the entire trip home. The crocodile sighed and nudged her to the living room before closing the door. Hopefully she wouldn't try to break out through the window or anything in that short amount of time. Thankfully she remained still, staring at the unfamiliar interior. She appeared interested in the mock-up of the crime scene. It was the only thing Body hadn't had time to clean up before heading out. Forgive the mess, I was solving a case yesterday. No response. Body swelled in Taking Lisa's hand, he guided her to the bedroom he had prepared in case something happened to Angela. He had gotten a new bed that expected furniture and some toys such as jigsaw puzzles, miniature hunters, and abomination chalkboard. The detective lamented not being in touch with what little girls like, and Elisa's lack of reaction made it harder to gauge by how much he had missed the mark. But she had brought her things with her, so in the worst case scenario, she could play with that. The bedroom did look a bit empty regardless. Buddy intended to buy her more things with the money from his last job. Buddy was discouraged by Alicia's apathy, at least until later that night when she spoke for the first time since arriving to ask him for more meat. Perhaps he couldn't gain access to her heart like her real family, but that was fine. He aimed for her stomach instead. Although Lisa soon ceased to try to escape from the crocodile whenever they were outside, such as when taking her to school, she was still unwilling to talk to him about anything but food. Moreover, since a new problem arose, Bobby would need to take a new job, which meant he wouldn't be staying at home as much. Angela had mentioned once Alicia used to hang out with her brothers at Earth's church. While he was concerned that the place would bring her unwanted memories, and none in months there were the only ones he could turn to for taking care of her while he was away. Still, he had to put aside some talk to walk her to school and then to the church a few hours later. That relatively small change of pace made him feel exhausted. At the end of the day, when he picked her up and went back home, he didn't have much time to rest until the girl went to bed. One day, Buddy woke up to find Alicia sitting in front of his mock-up. She had made a mess out of it, changing the room's configuration, adding little hunters here and there. She was trying to add more floors, but she was having trouble lining up the walls properly. Buddy announced his presence by clearing his throat before approaching her. "Hello, Alicia. Are you playing?" Alicia glanced at him and nodded. "I see. Would you like me to give you some of the little houses I made? I have a lot of them in my room. You could take them apart and make new stuff for them." "Really?" She turned to the crocodile. "Yes, let's play before I go out." After breakfast, Buddy put aside the mock-up he was using for work and brought from his room boxes containing miniature construction sets. Alicia was delighted to have so much more to play with, although after a while the crocodile left to cook breakfast. Still, it was nice that he had finally gotten a bit closer to her. "Be careful, Buddy." "Sorry." Buddy was trying to help Alicia brush her hair that morning, but he was too rough, causing the girl to complain. Although he had made a routine out of helping her get ready for the day, he wasn't used to this. He thought Alicia looked pale and that she didn't feel well, so he had offered an extra hand that morning, which the girl had accepted despite her process of feeling just fine. Alicia's vigor and irritation made him question if his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. "I'm so hungry." "Is that all you think of?" Hold still." The crocodile squinted as he lifted some of Alicia's hair with his finger. A few strands lacked her blonde colorization, leaving them white. Alicia's legs dangled from the stretcher, swinging back and forth as the doctor finished inspecting her with his stethoscope. The old human stood up and looked at the crocodile. "She's a perfectly healthy child as far as I can tell. It's the first time I hear of someone's appearance changing so drastically, and in the span of a few days, too. This is a condition that is not too well known nowadays. It's called albinism. Basically, a person can lose the pigment that gives their skin and hair color midway. Do you know of any of her relatives who show similar symptoms? Well, her mother looks like this as well. Then there you have it. She probably inherited it from her mother. Now, there are a few things to look out for. For instance, too much sunlight may impact her negatively, so Bobby wasn't convinced by this mumble jumble. How could such a bizarre condition exist in nature? It sounded like the man was describing a vampire to him, leaving out the superhuman strength and the longevity. But he had to recognize Elisa was behaving as usual. He couldn't argue with the doctor's conclusion, so he nodded and the two of them left after Bobby paid a fee. 2 years ago, Angela told Bobby that her son had died. Elisa, around the same time, said that her grandpa Years ago, Angela told Bobby that her son had died. Elisa, around the same time, said that her grandpa, father, and David had gone away. Them saying different things, and the fact that until Elisa mentioned it, Bobby knew nothing of a grandparent made this stick with him. Elisa Bobbyism made her look so much more like her mother, so Bobby was now reminded of this. The neighborhood was peaceful except for some dogs barking and servants doing work in the surrounding properties' yards. Angela's house, however, was dead quiet. Bobby fixed his black scarf and looked up at the building. It was exactly as it was 2 years ago. No one else had moved in or seized it. With Elisa's pair of keys in hand, the crocodile unlocked the door and went in and to the second floor. Gabriel's door was locked, so he simply kicked it out of the way and invited himself in. But he had hoped to learn anything about the man. By a glance, the room quickly extinguished that hope. A fire had taken place here, and the only remaining objects were those that had been destroyed: a bookshelf, a carpet, and a desk. The entire house smelled like dust and stale air, but here, Bobby's nostrils didn't detect anything. A brief search of the desk returned nothing. The books that remained weren't in a readable state. Bobby gave up on this room and searched the rest of the house. It was in Elisa's former room that the crocodile found something that caught his eye, a diary that she had left behind. Praying for forgiveness, the crocodile opened and started reading through its entries. Elisa narrated her daily adventures with her brother in most of the pages, with only some being dedicated to complaining or fawning over her parents or bad-mouthing a classmate. However, near the end, there were some entries about her catching her grandfather doing one of his meanest and strangest dreams she had subsequently. After a pause, the crocodile took the diary and put it where he found it, shoving his hands in his coat and testing his shoulders so they pressed his scarf against his neck. Bobby headed back home. He wasn't going to make Elisa talk about this. He needed another source of information. The bar felt strange at this time of the day. It was still bright outside. Plenty of people passed by the local, and many of the clients were much younger than Bobby was used to. He drank his wine quietly in a dark corner of the building. Finally, the chime announced his contact's arrival and his signal for him to sit at his table. Sorry for the wait. It's been a busy day at work. It seems to be the case lately. People downtown have been agitated as of late. The man sighed as he sat down. So what do you need? Help with one of your investigations? Sorry to disappoint, but this isn't anything to involve the local police in. Do you remember Angela? Of course, you had me watching her for so long. She was an intern, yes? How is she? Why he clicked his tongue, claw dancing on his glasses lips. She's gone. She passed away 2 months ago. Heart attack. Oh, I'm sorry. Back to our business. What do you know about her father? The police officer raised an eyebrow. His hand moved to the pocket where he kept his cigarettes, only to quickly return to the table. Gabriel White, the fellow was sort of a celebrity at the police station. He was never found to be involved with anything shady, but he had interesting friendships. How long has it been again? 3 years since he passed away, and 2 since our daughter Alicia. But he was young. He inherited a fortune in a naval company from his late father. I believe they became wits offering transportation to local hunters back in the day when abominations were more common. He continued his father's work, but he also started investing in archaeology. Yes, he funded a couple of projects to recover buried old world objects. It was during this time that he made friends with some infamous characters. For instance, this man was called Tonio, was known for counterfeiting and smuggling. I imagine no evidence of smuggling was found regarding his archaeological projects. The policeman nodded. It was the strangest thing. A couple of characters like Tonio visited his house, stayed a couple of hours there, and then left, never to return. As you can imagine, a lot of rumors started circling about the guy. Personally, I think he got into archaeology specifically to meet people like this as a pretext. Perhaps what he wanted with them has more to do with his father's company. Yes, but again, we never got to investigate that. Body blank, eyes searching. Why had he not heard about this? Why had he not heard about this earlier? With Angela dead, Gabriel's only remaining relatives were his son-in-law and daughter. Did Gabriel leave behind a will? I understand he was fairly old. Yes. What did it say about Alicia? Nothing. Before he asked, well, wasn't mentioned there either. Then, where's one of the things now? The so-called David, Angela's oldest son, I believe. I still ran up by his spine. He seemed surprised. Why are you asking him all about this in any case? I figure you aren't interested in an inheritance from the rich grandfather. The crocodile down what remained his wine shook his head. He told the officer about his visit to Angela's house and his findings leaving out the bit about the broken door. Caught a gut feeling, but something's wrong here. What happened to Gabriel? What was he doing? Why did David disappear? Why did Angela talk about David as if he were dead? Has anyone ever even seen David, or is he alive? The police officer pursed his lips and crossed his arms over the table. He's alive, without a doubt. One of my coworkers and some lawyers met with him when it was time for him to claim the inheritance. The man looked behind him before standing up and leaning close to Buddy. He whispered his next words. But that came as a surprise for us. 3 years ago, we recovered what we initially thought was his corpse alongside Gabriel. It was a young man that perfectly fit his description. Yet, no matter how much we looked into it, the man that claimed the inheritance was, without a doubt, David. So who the hell was it? Who did we find alongside Gabriel? Neither of them could make head or tails of the situation. Bobby was curious about Will's activities, but that was all. He wouldn't concern himself with whatever his old friend was up to or the circumstances behind his disappearance. This had happened 3 years ago, so all trails were cold by now, but more importantly, Bobby feared what this could mean for Alicia. Perhaps it was for the best that he had no chance to find out the truth, and so he would leave the issue buried and go on with his life. At least that was the plan. The large man's vertebrae snapped into place, one by one, as he sat up and stretched his arms. It was a bit early for him to wake up, but a strong smell had pulled him out of his dream while making his stomach rumble all the time. Oh wow. After putting on some long pants and a white t-shirt, he left for the kitchen. There was Elisa, cooking some meat, eggs, and vegetables. Perhaps because of her time at Earth Church, she had gotten much better at cooking. Buddy was proud but also jealous. He would ask her for some cooking lessons later. Good morning, Buddy. Hi. Got to work early today, The crocodile looked over her shoulder to the sizzling meat. The smell and sound alone had him salivating. Yes, just so you know, it's easier to cook when there is a mountain standing in the way. Sorry, I'll just watch from a distance. Bonnie leaned against the wall next to the door, and as he watched his daughter continue her work. By the way, Bonnie, I've been thinking of the future. It took the crocodile a second to process the question. Lisa now brought out these kinds of topics. Oh, well, that's normal for your age. What's on your mind? She remained silent as he took the eggs out of the pan and into the plate meant for Buddy. Then she suddenly turned to him, looking into his eyes. Will you let me come with you for the next job? What for? Do you want to be a detective, are you sure? She nodded. I meant I'm surprised it never struck me that you were interested in that. Well, growing up, hearing about your job makes it sound, how to say it, it's appealing. At least it wasn't a terrible lie, but she couldn't make it sound sincere. Still, what she wanted was obvious. Buddy figured that now she was all grown up, she had questions about her family. Well, Lisa shouldn't meet again. He wasn't sure about her brother, but considering what he had heard, it was safe to assume he'd be bad news as well. At the same time, just how likely was it that she'd find him? If Buddy couldn't do it, then neither could Lisa. But that meant she'd waste a major part of her life in fruitless endeavor if he let her go ahead. I know what you're thinking, Alicia. Listen, I can't guarantee you'll get what you want, understand? I don't know what you're talking about, but I insist, let me be your assistant. But I can't just take you with me with zero preparation, right? If you want to come with me, you have to learn how to investigate first. I'll make you realize. In the meantime, think carefully about what you want, alright? This time she didn't retort, nodding silently. Shortly after she finished cooking breakfast, her body helped set the table. Finalizing playback. So, apparently, David is alive. After all, he collected an inheritance from his father. Bonnie thought that he was dead, and Angela told him that David was dead. But the police officer said that Dave was still alive, and apparently the body that they thought was David was next to Gabriel. Apparently that body wasn't David, it was somebody else. So I don't know what happened. I don't know, some murder going on, I have no idea. But it's getting kind of strange about this whole ordeal. So, what will that mean for Lisa? Because she loved David very much. She always talked about him in her diaries, and she was always looking forward to playing with him. So we're going to go ahead and start the next story. Probably Lisa's diary again. initializing playback. I've been thinking about my mother lately and how she changed after the rest of our family vanished. I don't remember her that well by now, but in retrospect, I realized she probably wasn't very happy with Dad. When both of them were home, David would always try to keep me away for as much time as he could. She and Dad slept in different rooms we never ate together. But she was always kind to me and tried to force a smile, so I thought she was happy. I think the first time I ever saw her being happy was after everyone vanished. A family suddenly being broken like that is sad, but she seemed so relieved, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She started spoiling me a lot more and taking me out to play or eat. But then she started changing again after the time her skin and hair became white and her eyes red. I said she looked just like Grandpa and she forced a laugh. She started getting loopy, forgetting things, thinking Dad and David were still around, taking me to Grandpa's funeral when it had already been months since then. And she started getting violent outbursts. She said that a voice talked to her and that it even had a name, although I can't recall it now. Her health declined very quickly. It was very creepy to see her transform like that. Not just because of how she changed, but because upon further thought, she acted just like Grandpa used to. David told me about Grandpa when he was young, how he had become a different person after our great grandfather passed. Back then, David said that Grandpa heard voices. I thought it was a joke, but when I put that together with Mom's ramblings and how similar situations were, it paints a creepy picture. Especially because I hear it too. Whenever I go to Earth Church, I hear whispers. Sometimes I'll look over my shoulder thinking someone's trying to talk to me, but there's no one behind me. I don't want what happened to Grandpa and Mom to happen to me. I wish Dad was here. I want to ask him what the meaning of this is. David knew more than he let on, so there's a chance Dad does as well. I'm not sure, but I might try to track him down. I just don't want to wither as Mom and Grandpa did. Bonnie finally took me with him to solve a case. Bit something he thought would be easy and put some ridiculous conditions like that we had to solve it that same day. It was an open and shut investigation once we found out about the resort owner's new will, so we got it done in time. So now he has to fulfill his promise to take me on future jobs. When I'm at that, I've been trying to figure out a way to track Dad down, but it's been so many years that I don't know where to get started. Barney looked into this as well, but back in the day, he gave me some of his notes. He recommended I didn't look for David, and I can see why. It's not impossible that he's dead and being impersonated by someone who wanted my grandpa's company. If only I could remember what happened back when he and Dad disappeared. But for some reason, I find it hard to believe that David's alive. In case I try to look into a place where Grandpa's company has been active, and I'll ask around for Dad there. He might not still be working for them, but it's the only shot I got. Besides, I might run into someone who does know him and can tell me of his whereabouts. Finalizing playback. So, these stories here dealt with both Elisa and Lois when they were children. And these here are stories that continue their lives 18 years into the future. So they must be in their very early 20s now. Both of them. Elisa here is a grown woman. This is Elisa's diary as a grown woman. And I believe when we when we begin this story here, we will see Alois as a grown man. Okay, so we're about to begin this story here. So, with these other parts here, this story here will take place 18 years after this story here, when Alois was a kid. So, lucky Alicia, she was a grown woman in her 20s now. In this story here, is where her in her diary, she was in her 20s now. So Alois should be in his 20s now. Now that this story here takes place 18 years into the future. So we got to learn how Alois became a Knock monk. So he was a smart kid, and that was able to gain the attention of the visiting abbot at the orphanage. I'm gonna go ahead and start this story now. Initializing playback. The night was as silent as still water. There were no waves, no whistling, no rustling of leaves. The boots of the guards working on the walls were the only source of disturbance, but the resulting motion was quickly absorbed by the darkness before it could form even a ripple. Not even the moon's blue glow could penetrate this realm. The Knox's church, such perfect stillness, was an object of worship. Where else would this be the case if not were they worship the Lord of darkness? The dark was more than an absence of light, an absence of heat, an absence of sound, an absence of motion. The very concept of absence was dark. And so, what did this say of a monk that would disturb this sacred darkness little by little? The creak of a door opening, steps on the pavement outside, the swinging of an unlit oil lamp, and his nails grazing brick upon reaching the wall. An absence of faith was a sign of the darkness within this man. Was he a heretic or an envoy of this domain's God? The man walked by the wall, kneeling on all fours as he made his way to a barred door. He froze when he saw a hint of light approaching closer from the other side. His lungs deflated when he saw the glow become dimmer. Almost there. The monk stepped closer as he took a key from under his sleeve. He settled into the lock and turned it. A satisfying series of clicks followed. It's scarcely a known fact about Knox church was that it had two entrances. Nowadays, the abbot would never meet when not personally, utilizing a magic gem to communicate with him instead. But this wasn't the case in the old days. The second entrance had been used for the first few abbots easily access Hallow Mountain. Alois couldn't be sure if it was still there. If it wasn't, he would go back to his cell and come up with a different plan later. Soon he ran into a door much like the one he had opened not too long ago, except that this one was covered by rust and being held close by a chain and a padlock. Beyond it was the forest lit by the moonlight. This was it. He had a few minutes of work. Bear made them count. Alois turned on a lamp and inspected the padlock. It was a small thing. They probably had obtained it somewhere down in the village. He retrieved a pair of picks and, still holding the padlock, got to work. People change in curious ways as they grow up. They remain static in some aspects but completely turn around in others. Alois had accepted to come to the church not because he was interested in old world mythology, but as he matured, his interest took a sharp turn. He still enjoyed mythology, of course, but he had also become enthralled by the people behind it. When he was little, he believed the stories about all those strange creatures, and after he realized that they were mostly fictional, he started wanting to know the reason behind such marvelous lies. Everything from the old world was documented in the church's vast archives, so it wasn't difficult to find answers. There's many reasons for a story to exist, as there are people on Earth, cautionary tales for children, metaphors, wild retellings of more mundane events. For instance, if it was common for drownings to occur in a certain river, someone would make up a monster to blame for it and spread stories about it. As a result, people would stop going to that river or be more cautious when near it, preventing future accidents. Or in a more extreme case, let us say a war between two nations was framed as a fantastic epic by the winner, as a form to both establish the winner's cultural hegemony and to justify the persecution of any dreads of the losing empire, which would be absorbed into the other cultures and territory. Not to mention that a tale of heroic monster slaying is always more palatable than one of human contact. When he was younger, Alois struggled with the concept of gods. He admired them for the monsters he loved so much. Arthur were their creation. But often it was by the will of another god that a monster would meet its end. Now he understood that monsters and gods were much more similar than he initially thought. Both existed because the world needed something from them. They were tools to navigate reality with clarity or to muddle matters too terrible to speak out late. And so I'll always wonder if the same couldn't be said about the seven. He didn't doubt the existence of magic. He had seen plenty of it since he arrived at the church and was even in the process of learning some. The monk questioned the existence of gods this magic was attributed to. But why would it be necessary to create the seven? The answer lies in the fact that the Alois' world and the world in the second millennium before the cataclysm weren't so different. Despite the drastic changes Earth went through, geopolitical relationships remained mostly intact and they were still using the same economic system as a pre-cataclysm society. Most technology survived the catastrophe only to be confined to this little church. Let the seven hand merge as a way for the powerful ones from the pre-cataclysm world to remain in power. It was explaining the stasis they had put humanity under. Just like in the past, the story was meant to help maintain the status quo. He had even brought up this idea over a drink with his friends and coworkers, but at most they brushed it off, saying the notion was unfathomable as the world was ruled by faith. But thinking too hard about this conspiracy theory will only give Alois a headache. There was a better method to determine the truth, to visit Hollow Mountain and confirm if Nock was there or not. A pair of footsteps were approaching from deeper down the hallway. Just in time, the padlock opened with a click. Alois put off the lamp, removed the chains as silently as he could, and sneaked outside. The forest path was a little more arduous than he had anticipated, as it was unkept after falling and disused so many years ago. Still had the mountain's looming figure to guide him, so he wasn't worried about becoming lost. Just as his feet started growing weary, the forest opened up to reveal a sight he had only heard of thus far. At the foot of the mountain was a field of salt-like gravel and a large still pond at its center. Alois couldn't tell how deep it was since the water was pitch black, making it impossible to see the bottom. It could be mistaken for oil if not for the lack of stench. Alois thought back to the stories he used to hear about the church's old traditions. It was said that at night when the black lake turned pitch black like a pit, an entrance to the interior of Hollow Mountain would open. He walked around the black lake looking for a crevice hidden in the saddles. He stopped suddenly when he noticed one vertical opening in the mountain skin resembling a stab wound. It was just as dark as the lake. It gave him a feeling something was staring at him through that veil of black. But more importantly, it looked tight. It would be difficult to get through here. The monk crouched and stopped to think about it logically. Assuming that the deities were indeed made up, what he was about to do was very dangerous. He didn't have any experience with cave diving. Anything could happen once he went into the crevice. He suspected his self-preservation instincts were advising him against this idea, but he couldn't tell. All the alarms in his brain were out of service. Moreover, returning to the church empty-handed would be a waste after getting this far. With his mind made up, Aloy stood up and watched the crevice. He would need to enter sideways to fit in. He lit the oil lamp again and started to squeeze in. Although the entrance was nearly claustrophobic, as he went deeper, Aloy found less and less resistance. Eventually he was able to walk normally. He came out into what seemed like a large open area. He couldn't know for sure. It was too dark to see anything beyond the walls near him. Upon advancing deeper into the cave, Aloy ran into many rock formations, reminiscent of tree trunks, too tall for him to see the top. It was like a rock forest. As he navigated around these pillars, a strange sensation, as if he was dipping his feet in the water, invaded him. The monk wondered if he was imagining things, but soon the invisible water rose to his knees, making it difficult to move. He couldn't see the floor anymore. When he tried to back down, it was as if he was hit by a wave, pushing him against one of the pillars. The lamp didn't go off, but the fire was but a gray, blurry thing now, unable to provide any light. And so the man found himself surrounded by complete darkness. He had expected his lungs to fill with liquid and start suffocating. But that was not the case. His body quickly became accustomed to the strange weight surrounding him, and he was able to move normally. Was this the product of some strange magic, perhaps meant to deter intruders? No, that didn't feel quite right, because his darkness enveloping him had a welcoming quality to it. It was warm, peaceful. It was pleasant to move one's fingers through it, playing with the invisible substance. Aloy put out the now useless fire and resumed his journey, now sitting in his hand a few centimeters ahead to not hit any of the pillars. So difficult it was to see that the monk instantly realized something unnatural was happening when he saw a light in the distance. It was white, not quite intense as the blind him like a star in the sky. The star started moving, occasionally disappearing behind a pillar, almost as if it had noticed Aloy as it was running away, or as if it was toying with him, seeing as the monk tried to chase it but to no avail. That was until a few other lights joined it. One circle, a second circle, 6 lines beneath them, and one pointy smile. Aloy, for this part, was relieved that the damn light had stopped moving and came closer. Upon being around 3 meters away, he realized he was looking at a face. The light was not intense enough for him to make out its owner's unusual visage. Knock? What a creature! Dark as the water of the black lake, towering and teeth pointy enough to inflict terror in those who were let their imagination go wild. The monster closed the distance between the two of them as a loud chirping resonated from its throat. Slowly it reached out from the monk's neck and glanced A glance at that hand was enough to tell how powerful it was, not to mention the softness of its claw-shaped fingers. It drew circles around Aloy's throat, calling attention to this fact. But there was no immediate answer for this monk. He looked up at the monster, waiting for an answer. Eventually it cracked, and even larger smile wobbled up and down as it laughed. Its voice was hard to describe, but it wasn't like anything Aloy had heard before in his life. Suddenly there was a sound like that of a flesh tearing before snapping back into place, and the creature opened its mouth. I see that fear is unknown to you, my monk, and here I was, planning to scare you away as if you were a common intruder. The creature got closer. Aloy felt his breath hit his face. It was warm, but it didn't smell of anything, threatening to claw you to pieces or chew you up and swallow you. But such threats would fall on deaf ears. But Aloy wasn't sure. Something new, unknown, was washing over him. Was this what they call fear? It had been a long time since he had thought back to kids from the orphanage and how they react when a teacher became violent and whatnot. Did they also get this pulsing feeling in their stomach and chest? It was probably not the case, no. Those white eyes reflected freezing cold. But if so, then what was this? Why was his heart beating so fast? He was brought back to reality by the monster releasing his neck and taking a step back. I apologize for my lack of manners. According to human traditions, introductions are in order. What? Tell me your name, O clueless monk. Aloys. Not. Judging from your attire, you are one of my worshippers. Tell me, what possessed you to breach my domain? Aloys recovered enough composure to explain his reasons. Nock nodded as he listened to him, and once a monk finished explaining himself, he broke into laughter. What braver, or alternatively, lack of sense you show, my monk, in embarking on such a journey just so you could spit at these blasphemies in my face. And you pretend to understand the Seven's will as well. I'm sorry. Nock's lights flickered for a second. When they came back, Aloy realized he was cornered against a pillar that hadn't been there before. The god lunged at him and lifted him from the neck until his toes couldn't touch the ground anymore. The monk dropped the lamp, which broke and spilled its contents on the stone ground. As he took hold of the creature's arm, his body desperately trying to reduce the pressure on his neck on instinct. I will show you what a real god is, my monk. The monster's jaw opened wide until it looked as if his mouth extended to and beyond his neck. Then with a cracking sound, his head split vertically as if it was a sort of perverse flower opening its 4 petals. From the depth of his throat, a blinding white light shined through. He pulled Aloys closer to allow him to see inside. It was a scenery from another world. Slowly the monk was pulled closer and closer, thousands of eyes focused on him, a million teeth eager to consume him. Each one was flesh. The flesh was alive, breathing and opening and closing. It all reached for Aloys, trying to pull him deeper. Aloys gasped for air as Nock finally let go of him, letting him fall on his butt on the hard floor. I trust that your curiosity is sated. Now go away, be a good monk and stay in the church. Nock snapped his fingers and everything went black. A second later, Aloys found himself in his bed as if he had just woken up from a dream. His mask was hanging from his chair's back, where he always left it. His lamp was now on his desk and tied and next to his paper as usual. Aloys looked at his roommate, who was immersed in a deep sleep at the other end of the room. The monk lay on his side, facing the wall reached under his habit. He tried to contain his moans as he stroked himself, thinking about what he just experienced. Once he was close, he pulled the covers back and caught his load with his hand. Afterward, he let his hand clean of the evidence. He couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Alois found the keys he had stolen, getting the walls back in its rightful place in the key box. He took it with him again while helping close up the church that night. It was as if everything had been a dream. Even the padlock protected the passage to the fortress back to normal. Without hesitation, Alois picked it open again and made his way into the mountain. The wave of darkness hit Alois soon after he entered the crevice. Nock's lights didn't take long to appear after. They stopped moving for an instant when Nock noticed a man. They shook his head as he came out from under the saddles. So you aren't only lacking in fear, but self-preservation instincts as well. What did you come here for? The monk got on a knee and bowed. My curiosity about yesterday's matter has been sated, my lord, but... Yes. Alois could feel a lump forming in his throat. His mind was racing, trying to pick the right words to say, but he wasn't even sure of what he wanted to convey. He had been hastily returned to Nock before he figured out what was going through his head. It had been an impulse. As the monk Nock crouched, removing the monk's mask and nudged him to look him in the eye. He was searching for something. Alois. Yes, I remember now. You are the hatchling I found many years ago. You detected you were compatible with my magic. I could see why. These are not human eyes. You are my kin, despite your feeble cell. To think someone like you could be reborn among human beings, such flexible creatures. After returning the mask to him, the monster took the monk so as to make him rise to his feet. However, I do notice you are inflicted by a submissive streak. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my threats seemed to fluster you rather than scare you last night. Alois was at a loss of what he meant, except for that last part. He told himself that the seven worked in different mysterious ways, and tried to play along. Truth be told, there were dozens of questions racing through his mind, but unless he had time to organize his thoughts, whatever answer he may get wouldn't have helped him understand anything better. Alright, to go back to your question, my lord, I wanted to see you again. I can't give any reason, I just wanted to. As I said, you are under quite the submissive streak. Maybe it's just your nature, Not scratched the monk's chin playfully. A single drop of saliva escaped from the monster's mouth and then dribbled to the ground. I do realize now, however, that my actions yesterday must have seemed like a reward to you when they were meant as a punishment. So you crawled back to me for more of the thrill, but I won't give it to you. Wherever you might be under that skin, you are still one of my monks, so I can't turn a blind eye to your heresy. You shall be subservient to me, but under my terms. Before Alois could express his disappointment, Nock pressed a finger against his lips. That said, it's been a long time since I bonded with one of my own. My monk, no, Alois. Entertain me, and I shall forgive your sins in due time. And then, well, what is it that you are expecting? You'll find out if your performance is satisfactory. Also does. Nock removed his hand from Alois' face. The monk closed his eyes and bowed slightly. Yes, my lord. All went dark for an instant. When Nock's light returned, they found themselves in a room similar to one of the church's studies. It didn't look quite white, and outside the windows was completely black. not lay down on a couch and find a monk to take a seat across from him. To think a hybrid such as you would make his way to my church as opposed to herself, expecting my influence to draw in someone else like me. I hope I don't offend again, but I think you might be confused, my lord. You keep calling me your kin, but I'm just a regular human being. Not let out a low, guttural laugh. Eyes do not lie. You must feel alone in the human world. Every day you understand why everyone else acts the way they do, but are unable to connect with them. You compare them to yourself and you realize you don't quite work the same way. So you adapt, you imitate, but it doesn't feel genuine. Humanity. No, the children of Samuel are all worth loving. But that is something you must learn first. And being out there all your life without someone that can understand you. When it can be hard to love while being a fish in a water tank. I suppose so, yes. Still, I must insist I am not what you are, my lord. Knox shifted to lay on his side and stare at the monk. I recognize the psychological differences between you and me, the physiological difference between you and me, as well as that you are clad with a limited human perspective. But in our hearts, we are the same. Is that not why you returned? Because last night was the first time in a long time you experienced anything that felt real. The monk looked down at it as he contemplated his response. It's hard for me to put into words, but I think you are mostly correct, yes. No, the children of Samuel are all worth loving, but that is something you must learn first. And being out there all your life without someone that can understand you, well, it can be hard to love while being a fish in a long tank. I suppose so, yes. Still, I must insist, I am not what you are, my lord. Knox shifted to lay on his side and stared at the monk. I recognize the physiological differences between you and me, as well as that you are clad with a limited human perspective. But in our hearts we are the same. Is that not why you returned? Because last night was the first time in a long time you experienced anything that felt real. The monk looked down as he contemplated his response. It's hard for me to put it into words, but I think you are mostly correct, yes. But it's strange. You keep mentioning we are the same, but surely you don't refer to your divine nature. So what I want to ask is, what are you, my lord? Knox smiled, widened slightly as he sat up on the couch, his eyes fierce. There is no noun that encapsulates what I am. Let's create one right now. Not tap the table without any particular rhythm as he looked out the window to the nothingness beyond. Aloysius' gaze followed his, but behind was that darkness he was growing increasingly accustomed to. I am a voidborn. Is that satisfactory? Aloysius' routine wasn't affected too much by his encounter with Nock. Despite developing a bad habit of oversleeping every day, he still went to the south to clean himself, had breakfast at the refectory, offered his prayers at the church, and finally headed to the archives division for work. Aloysius would sit in front of a computer to transcribe papers, scan and digitize pictures, analysis, and upload them to the church's network for preservation purposes. Back when he just arrived here, he was surprised to discover that the Church of Gnosis library wasn't physical, but stored in servers in a room inside the archives building. Fortunately, he quickly got a hang of the technology. According to Alvaro, that was one of the advantages of being young. Aloysius managed to land a job in the archives division and stayed there ever since. By now, he had developed a skill set that would allow him to move to another division he he wasn't interested in that kind of change. It just made the research divisions were more exciting, but Alois didn't feel driven to scientific discovery. Recording other people's findings in modern and old world culture was interesting enough. Besides, this job allowed him to take a nap break every once in a while, assuming our co-workers wouldn't invite him to drink. Alois sneaking out became a nightly occurrence. Knock had granted him a master key to make the whole affair easier and kept getting rid of any evidence every night somehow. Lamont instinctively didn't question the strange things he was capable of. As for the guy himself, he turned out to be quite chatty. What are your thoughts on the end of the war, Alois? Are you referring to a cataclysm? No, my dear scientific friend. I speak about the events with the minds of this planet. You realize humans frame the cataclysm as an apocalyptic event, but it was nothing more than a slight change in the atmosphere. Oh, I don't know. We were talking about an event that could end all life on Earth. But that doesn't fit either, does it? If all life disappeared, the planet would still be there, just without us. I guess the world will only end once the sun becomes a red giant and consumes it. Now clapped. I'm always amazed by humanity's capability to foresee its own demise. But allow me to be fair to your own contributions to that conversation. The beginning and the end of the world can vary depending on how it's framed. So yes, you can call a mass extinction event that. I have a feeling you are going somewhere with this. Giggling, not signaled to Lamont, just listened and resumed his explanation. Before the cataclysm, humanity was quickly headed to such an event. It was a disaster of their own making, and they were aware of it. But because of the social constraints they had built around themselves, they were unable to stop, since the powerful had no interest in the misery that resulted from their actions, and everyone else was too cowardly to oppose them. It would not have been the end for all humanity, but it would have changed the landscape to their detriment. I think I have read this. I think I read about this. Yes. Would the result have been like our current world? It is hard to say, but allow me to explain how it would have accelerated the end of life on Earth. Now I had many interesting topics to talk about, pieces of information to say. The moment fascinated. Naturally, the events of their first encounter were still fermenting in Lamont's memories. And eventually he brought this up. He enjoyed his talks with the god, but he also wished to chase the high he had gotten from that moment would not expose his core to him. My lord, do you remember what happened when I first came here? Of course. You were act of insubordination. Yes, well, I'm forgiven for that. Alois, could it be that you are in heat? Do you intend to court me? Alois didn't think that was possible for male humans, but for now, he nodded. Squinting, Knock walked over the table and squared on it, meeting the monk at eye level. Pitiful creature incarcerated in a cell of flesh of Samel's design. The god nodded sullenly as he ruffled the human's hair. However, sins are not forgiven so easily. Perhaps a sacrifice is in order. Sacrifice? How about this? You could sacrifice your neck. Not pulled at Alois' throat. At that moment, something like a gem appeared in that same spot from a material like leather sprung out, forming a ring that encased Alois' neck. The god didn't look convinced. Alois lay back and relaxed, intending to let the god take whatever else he saw fit. You have so much I could take, Alois. Perhaps one of your five senses of an organ or part of your cognitive capabilities, a bite you feel inclined. Knock opened his mouth, and just as he was about to pull Alois in, he jerked back and shook his head sending some slobber flying. Wait, have you ever had sex? No, my lord. I see. Mortals put great efforts on if their bodies have met intimacy. It can be a matter of life or death in some places. Yes, that will be a fitting sacrifice that will fulfill your needs. One bird, two stones. The saying is the other way around, my lord. Thank you for the correction, dear Aloys. The lights went out. Not so Aloy's back, but instinctively gasped when he noticed the chair's back wasn't behind him anymore. He fell into something soft and the god crowd on top of him shortly after. The god's glow returned, revealing they now were in the dark church cell. At first this will be a comfortable setting. Now, how do we do this? Excuse me? I understand sex for you is penetrative in some capacity, so how exactly does it work? Well, any offerings or any offerfights do. Not inspected of months, ears, and nose as he said this. Do nails count as officers? How about your skin pores? Let's say I carve a new hole for this. How thoughtful you, my lord, but no. You would usually penetrate a man's mouth or anus. Aha! Knock gave Aloys enough space so he could undress. He caressed his tight belly and just the monk got rid of his habit, licking his teeth in anticipation. Plump. Aloys was in the middle of lowering his underwear when he heard a familiar sound of flesh tearing. The guy hunched over a white crack that wasn't there before, sprang across his back. Are you alright, my lord? Do not be afraid. I'm simply looking for an appropriate organ for this. There was a whipping sound as a lump appeared in his back, tearing the crack wider. This cell is so cramped. The guy's muscles bulged or rather became larger. His claws and teeth grew pointier. New eyes started popping out near the cracks along his back and tail, and his bones rapidly snapped and reformed as he adapted to his growing size. Finally, a series of white, several-foot-long tentacles exploded free from the lump, eliciting a relieved sigh for Knock and halting his mutation. While the prehensile appendages brushed Aloys' cheek, thanking him for his patience, I had to modify myself a little. Is this appropriate? Aloys answered by pulling his underwear down, revealing his rock-hard cock. His legs opened and allowed Nog to crawl on top of him. Human bodies are meant to break once they are stressed past a certain point. Aloys couldn't comprehend the fact his body could take this much, and so that damage was reflected in his overwhelmed mind instead. One tentacle wasn't stuffing him from either end, was instead playing with his penis and balls and massaging his chest. Nog wasn't familiar with human bodies in this manner, so he was taking his time exploring them inside and out. He was only allowed brief moments to breathe when Nog judged he was nearing his limit. He kept missing something about the monk's lung capacity and training him. He couldn't catch every word, but the intent was clear. He had already came many times, but Nog wasn't stopping. Maybe he didn't know when to stop, or maybe since this was meant as a sacrifice, it mattered little when the monk's body had enough. This wasn't how sex should go. It was a cruel imitation by a creature with a twisted understanding of both human intimacy as well as a deity. No common human being would have found the experience enjoyable. It was fortunate it was Aloys he was fucking. My Aloys, when you first came here, I threatened to eat you. You must understand this. I should not exist in this world. We do not have souls in the void. were intrinsically different. The God's voice had a playful, hushed tone. He spoke directly to his good monk's ear. Alois could understand every single word this time. I instinctively feel inclined to quit that difference. Interacting with humans in person is always a struggle with that instinct, a fight to not devour. It isn't lethal for voidborns, but bodies like yours are small and frail. They become lost very easily. But even if I do lose control, it is alright. You're just flesh, nerves, and souls deal with information. Accidents. Even souls are not as irreplaceable as some think. Accidents are too different from DNA or the patterns of the electricity traveling through your brain. Like any other substance is malleable. And exactly because you are small and frail that it is easy to make you. If I ever devour you, I could always take your soul and rebuild you from the ground up. Is that an appealing prospect? If you want me to continue being such a good boy, perhaps I shall allow you to honor in some distant future. Do you want to know what being a real monster feels like? As if it was an illusion, Nox's hands phased through Alois' chest and into him. A bolt ran through the monk's body, forcing him to release but little contact his prostate still held. Slowly Nox pulled his hand back. His main tendrils started retreating inside his body, and all the extra eyes closed as he returned to his original size. Alois was unresponsive. Wings, how are you feeling? It's the first time Nox asked that upon finding a monk. Alois had taken off his mask and was rubbing his eyes. He was still sore all over and felt like he didn't sleep all last night despite passing out as his rough chestnut was preparing him for his sentence. Even his co-workers had taken notice of his sorry state and prepared extra coffee for him during their shift. He had considered skipping his nightly visit, but in the end he mustered just enough drive to come all the way here. I'm still a little out of it after last night. It was very intense, my lord. Do you remember everything? Up until we finished, yes. I see. Very good. Nox snapped his fingers and lights flickered. The dark sound, Nox sat down on the bed, sitting on the monk to join him. It looked as if Alois would pass out again when he lay down, using the Nox lap as a pillow, but somehow he remained awake. The god caressed his hair, letting him relax in silence. Now I wouldn't say it, but he was overjoyed to see Alois return after what he told him last night. He would have picked him up and hugged him hard enough to break his spine if not for him looking so tired, not wanting to help him relax that night instead. Alois, how do you enjoy your free time? You know, I enjoy reading, yes. I have a bit of vivid imagination, so I like to draw scenes from the books I read. I'm not too good at it. I understand that art classes are one of the churches of Submit's many perks. Will you be interested in attending them? It's just a way to pass time. I'm not sure I want to go away just for that. The monk took hold of the Nox long-tailed hooded as he let out a long yawn. After a while, Nox lay down with him and closed his eyes. It had been a long time since the god had allowed himself to sleep, so he wanted it was just one night. He wondered if their dreams were intertwined, but intertwined just like back when he slept alongside his kin submerged in the void. During his time in the Archives Division, Alois sensed a pattern when it came to eras long past. An order would be established to bring security and comfort to everyone. But these systems were designed to benefit favored groups while allowing outsiders to fall outside of their bubbles. This would create stress and unrest which would grow until it exploded into violence. This process was often repeated multiple times, wearing down a system which then would be completely taken over and replaced or would seek a compromise. Compromises rarely change anything, merely stalling the exit of the current system. Change and the factors linked to it usually manifested in gruesome ways. But even then, people have a hard time accepting change, so they would settle for something not too different from what came before. As a result, the same would happen again. The church's archives were a kaleidoscope, reflecting the same events from different angles as it spun. With every span, there'd be small differences, but the motion would never stop. And so the might wonder, was their current world a continuation of that same kaleidoscope, or was he living somewhere else altogether? Besides the abominations that resulted from deals with demons, this world wasn't very violent. Major wars hadn't broken out in centuries. But economic inequality still existed. In big part, why the churches still held influence is they were the resources that they had amassed following the cataclysm, which alongside the seven's authority allowed them to play roles in society that would be hard to replace. Some churches had wealth now that human governments competed with it, but because they were connected with not church, some churches would always have an edge. Similarly, Earth Church owned infrastructure and instruments that allowed it to give housing and food to those less fortunate, helped the hunters from Fire's Church, and run hospitals. All this on a global scale. Such a large operation couldn't be led by humans. This is possible only because they were united under Earth's banner. An entity outside of this world without creed, without interest outside helping others. Not to mention the ability to grant magic. Although not claimed to be an alien even among the other gods, these were traits all of them shared that made their rule possible. Still, sacrifices had to be made to get here. Even if they didn't use violence, the Seven had created a one-sided relationship of dependency with humanity, which was just as coercive. Despite their best efforts, people were still falling through the cracks. After all, they had based their world on imperfect moral design to allow just that. It was just a matter of time before the voices that was left behind made themselves known. What I always wondered was what they would be proclaiming. One day, Alois was summoned by the abbot's son, Enrique. The young man dressed up in an outfit not too different from his father's and had a kind look in his eyes. And the monk noticed a shortness in his gaze that told him the man's character wasn't too different from Aval's, as much as he tried to hide it. Alois imagined he was the abbot's spitting image when he was younger. Welcome, Alois. I apologize for summoning you on such short notice. There's no problem. As Alois sat down on the chair in front of his desk, the crocodile took out a notebook and a pen. He had been looking for opinions from trusted members of our church on how to improve management in the following years. I'd like you to answer a few questions. Alois shifted slightly and tilted his head. Excuse me, but I am a trusted member, as you said. Of course, my father doesn't let just anyone work in the archives. I believe he places a great deal of faith in you. Overall, the man had very one-of-the-mail questions. He asked about Alois' work conditions, the material condition of the church, and what he thought about the abbot and the rest of the administration. Alois answered most questions with measured optimism, especially when it came to the staff. As you may already know, lately most of the churches have been losing ground in the outside world. Although we might be in our exception due to our secluded nature, what are your thoughts to improve the situation? I believe the churches must continue to do the best work they can. Although we might see some opposition from individuals and governments, there's no reason churches and society at large can't coexist in the future. There were plenty of reasons that it wasn't possible, but Alois didn't want to risk getting into a discussion. That's true. However, there are groups of citizens that strongly oppose the church, citing that their government has removed humanity's capacity to make their own choices, or even claiming that the seven are imposter gods. What do you think about this? That's because the topics the monk had been thinking about lately. His response came out worded stronger than he intended. Well, I imagine that if such a movement gained traction, it would be a complicated matter to deal with. It wouldn't be strange if active opposition escalated into one group using force to subdue the other. The church would try to suppress them, of course. Someone noticed started creeping up Aloysius' spine. Wasn't the crocodile simply nodded and grinned as he rolled down something? That's all. Thank you very much, Aloysius. Your contribution will be very valuable. After a handshake, he sent the monk off. Aloysius felt relieved the ordeal was over, but the wicked reaction to that last question left him wondering what the purpose of the interview was. Aloysius, my lady, it's you. Knight was lying down while Aloysius sat on his lap. The God buried deep enough in him that he could feel his guts being stirred, so he could be forgiven for needing to double take. Excuse me? You can do that? In the course of the means through which human beings reproduce, yes? I took that into account when making this set of genitals. The god being replied, You really think of everything, my lord, but not ready for that responsibility. I suppose so. May I use blanks then? I'm interested in exploring your potential use of as a hatchery. Of course, the tentacle was spreading against its entrance before the post forced its way inside, sending several along Aloysius' spine. In a perverse flash of inspiration, Nuck had positioned the tendril in such a way each egg he inserted would hit the human's prostate. He quickly drove Aloysius over the edge. As the monk had enough for the night, he asked the god if they could stop. Not agreed, although not without declaring that Aloysius could hold more of his offspring and that he'd find his limit one of those nights. Incidentally, they spent the following minutes cuddling as Aloysius slowly pushed the eggs out. Not wore his face against the monks, led him and kissed him the entire time. Aloysius wondered if void were the ones that went in heat because the prospect didn't make much sense to him. It didn't sound like they needed to reproduce even if they could, as not have proven tonight. Perhaps I'll ask him later. He's so fascinating. Aloysius lazily opened his eyes in response to not staking him and whispering his name. The guy was touching noses with him. Good morning. Yes. Are you prepared to go back? Maybe. The monk was tempted to close his eyes and go back to sleep, but Senator Drew impeded him. At least he had some time to think with Knock while he got dressed. Remember our conversation about Samaritan Church? I wouldn't go there just another draw, but it would be a different story if I could be transformed. I glanced at him as he lay lazily on the bed. As although it is fairy world, for instance. Yes, although, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of blessing hasn't been granted in a long time. Not on a large scale, no, but there are exceptions. I could persuade some man and grant you a new form if you wish so. I would endure transforming you into a more fitting shape with my own hands as well, but it would be difficult to explain to others. Knox's smile widened. On the topic of Submitted Church, they do offer werewolf and vampire programs now. That could be interesting. I've always been a fan of werewolves, looking like one would be amazing. I don't think I would ever turn back to my human form unless I needed to. Is that strange? I will support you in your surpassing human body, Aloysius. Aloysius was ready to go, but not brought them back to the mountain's cage in a blink. They were in the middle of saying their goodbyes when they noticed a set of footsteps. Sound that traveled far in there, to the parts of those who hadn't heard anything like this so far. The steps became more frenetic, and then stopped as if their owner realized their presence had been detected. Hello? Come out. We know you're there. After a few seconds, the sound resumed, drawing closer. From the cells, a small figure emerged. A monk? Alois didn't remember ever seeing this monk in the abbey. No wonder Knox Church had both the largest facilities and population. He couldn't know everyone, but he found this boy off-putting for different reasons. What was he doing here, and why did he handle him with such a lack of humility? Knock, I've been looking for you. We were supposed to have a meeting last night, remember? The boy glanced at Alois. What is happening? My apologies, Oakley. It escaped my mind entirely. I was busy last night, you see. Excuse me, I am Alois from the Church of Knock. What's your name? The boy lowered his gaze, his lips pursed. I'm sorry, they call me Frank. Can you explain what is going on here? But that's not what Knock just called you. It is almost dawn. Let us reconvene later this night. After a moment, the small monk shoulders relaxed and he nodded in agreement. I will be looking forward to seeing you tonight, Alois. Yes, my lord. Knock raised his hand and snapped his fingers. During breakfast and dinner, Alois kept an eye out for the monk he had met at Hollow Mountain, but to no avail. After the sunset, he sneaked out of his cell and made his trip to the mountain. The darkness of Hollow Mountain welcomed Alois, soon to be followed by Knox's toothless bound in a hood that took the monk's feet off the ground. Frank joined them soon after, at which point Knox transported them to a more comfortable location to talk. The three sat around a pale campfire in the middle of the forest. The fire flickered, its light unable to reflect even on its guests. Frank looked displeased. Somehow his expression only became more grim the more he heard from Knock. I see, and to think this has been happening for months. Although now that I heard the story, I wonder why I even asked. Because you suspected me of plotting behind your back? I won't deny it. If I may ask, who are you really, Frank? You don't strike me as a common monk. It seems to me like you two are walking on eggshells now. An uncomfortable grimace returned to Frank's face. He looked at Knock as if expecting him to say something. I have not told you everything about my duties, Alois. Something besides your duty as a deity, I presume? Knock hunched closer. Frank didn't look any less intense, but didn't interrupt the god. This predates me becoming one of the seven. I'm here to fulfill a promise. Mine, and what sort of promise? To bring Samara home. Eons ago, before the world's fake stars started shining, a mother gave birth to a 3-year-old child. The mother was a member of a cursed species called Aeons. The Aeons were born amidst the purest of lights. They could never become a source of light themselves, for they were incomplete. Moreover, the darkness beyond filled the Aeons with dread, so they stuck close to the light, which they decided was comforting and good. The Aeons started worshipping the sacred sun that gave birth to them. They reached out for it and gave it a name, Abraxas. Suddenly, Abraxas changed. Its shape unwinded into that of a long snake. The snake was split into two from head to tail, and the two halves intertwined until they formed a shape similar to the sun it once had been. Having determined the existence of good and evil, the Aeons strived to improve their lives. They came up with rules that would allow them to remain under the sunlight. The most important of them all said as follows: "We are incomplete, thus we must search for a complementary light in others. So you desire to create life, you must ensure your combined splendor is second only to that of the sacred sun. But eventually, a single aeon, Sophia, realized the terrible truth. The rules they imposed on themselves reflected on a process slowly snuffing out its light by contaminating it with subjectivity. The aeon's decline into the darkness was inevitable. No matter how close a piece of ember tries to remain close to the fire, it will go out sooner or later. In fact, the ember's best hope was to fly far away in hopes of finding matter to burn and prolong its fire. All the aeons were accomplishing with their rays was to take their precious sun down with them. And so Sophia became determined to reveal the truth to her kin. Alone she headed to the border of their world and gave birth to her son. Soon after, she was discovered the really three-eyed child in her arms. Horrified, the aeons locked her up and gazed out the child's third eye before throwing him into the darkness in hopes he would be forgotten. The child was blind. Although a process was a long story in the void, he was unable to see it. Now he had a recollection of something holding him, so he cried, unable to understand why he was alone. He called out for his mother, for anyone to save him. And that was when he drew us in. Back then we did not have names in need of the child, but he appeared to be familiar with the concept, so he proposed for all of us to name each other. We indulged him as we found the prospect amusing. He named me Knock. He named my friend Doro. He named our Lord. What was it again? It's been a long time since I had said I last thought that name. I cannot recall it. Proceeding we debated about what suited the child. Because he couldn't see us, only hear us, we called him Samel. Samel was happy living with us for a time, but much like the rest of his kin, he always felt incomplete. Particularly, he was afflicted with nostalgia for the life he briefly saw before the other aeons harmed him. He did not worship Ablasis. What he longed for was just to see again. One day he claimed he had found a solution for this conundrum and told us he would leave on a journey, but that he would be back soon. He never came back, although I cannot say what gave him the idea he created this world for creatures he can see. But none of his creations were smart or had the will to live. All of them would destroy themselves as soon as he brought them to the world. Samel's body was made of matter just like theirs. He had something they lacked, the soul. So he took a fragment of his soul and gave it to his children. With this method, Samel created true life. However, children continued to meet tragic and gruesome ends. To make matters worse, the Aeons took notice of his world and vowed to destroy it, since they considered it a mockery of Brox's creations. Bound down by his love for his creations, the terrible fate that torments him, and the threat of Aeons, Samel became trapped here. An unspeakable amount of time has gone by since. For an unspeakable amount of time, we have watched over him. We cannot see him, we cannot talk to him, but we can still hear him. He is lonely and tired, and so we will bring him back home. That's what I promised my Lord. Why does his name elude me? Now played with his antenna, wearing a quizzical look. I always brought a hand to his chin. If I may, how are you planning to accomplish this? You must not be familiar with teleporters. They were an impressive piece of decided technology that became abandoned upon sage-sitters adopted them for their own ends. Sage-sitters? The beings you know as demons. I should tell you this fate at a later time. You will find it enjoyable. Frank clicked his tongue, and that comment looked away. Frank clicked his tongue at that comment and looked away. Not explaining that due to past events, the wall separating Earth from the void has become thinner. If one more teleporter over a breach, will open a tear that would rapidly ravage this world, much like a bubble bursting and free Samael in the process. This was his Lord's plan. Once not was done, Franks turned slightly to Aloysius' direction. I suppose that sounds logical, but you mentioned that the teleporters had been abandoned. Destroyed, rather, but yes. Not one of the leaders of the state-shifters came up with most of the operation. He knew this would require tact, which is why part of my role was infiltrating the organs, the ones humans call the Seven, by being discovered by Temp. Once here, I would find recruits that believe in some phony cause he made up so that they would do our bidding. It took many centuries by man to locate a teleporter in a repairable state deep underground. For years now, my human minions have been performing smuggling operations to procure the necessary materials to repair it. It's almost done. Currently, we're waiting for Nominal to do his part. He glanced at Frank. Dude, bring news. He said he's waiting for the right time, again. Frank, if I may ask, where's your role in all this? At this point, I might as well tell you. Allow me to introduce myself properly. As Frank removed his mask, his body went through a transformation. His skin changed to black and white scales, his skull transformed into that of a reptile, his little fingers vanished. My name is Obi, I am the battery. I'll be providing the teleporter with the power needed to create a breach when the time arrives. Obi had been gauging Aloysius' reactions, or lack of thereof. Throughout the conversation, his latest reveal included. At this point, he couldn't be surprised at the monk's apathy. You don't seem surprised. No, although I suppose this does explain the way you handle yourself. I hope this isn't rude, but you didn't strike me as a common monk. You don't strike me as that either. Tell me, are you not bothered by anything you heard today? Are you not afraid? You didn't catch that if we go ahead with this, everything you know will be destroyed, yes? Yes, but I'm not afraid. Well, I see now why Nock wants to keep you around. The sand goblin turned away. May I take you back to the cave? Thank you, but I know the way back. Let's meet again next week. The god nodded and Obi walked away, disappearing into the cells. What a curious sensation did not skin give. Although I always felt human, almost as if it was coated in some slippery substance, but rough when rubbing it. It made a nice contrast with those thick tentacles of his. When they were alone together, Aloysius went entirely exploring every little curve of his body, feeling how they interacted with the roughness. Passively, Nock had developed a habit of nibbling him. Although considering all the slobber, in his case, he was probably hungry. The god cursed under his breath and went lower, putting his long tongue to work on the monk's cock. No doubt he wouldn't have resisted sinking his teeth in his flesh otherwise. Nock? Aloysius spoke in between coarse breaths. I've been thinking about Samael. Something doesn't add up. He says he's bound down by his love for his creations, but if you destroy this world, a tendril going up his rear made the monk unable to speak further. After Nock climbed on top of him, looking him in the eye. Aloysius, my dear, Aloysius, and perceptive as always, you are touching on a question that's been tormenting me even. Destroying all of his creation will certainly harm Samael. However, if left alone, he will suffer nonetheless. The Lord thinks it is preferable to free him, but I am not so certain. Spending time with you as a guardian deity has led me to develop compassion towards humanity, so I understand. Truth be told, I love you too. All of us? Especially you, Aloysius, but yes, all of you. I did not see a future where some man would be happy with your demise. What is your opinion on this? The monk was trying his best to answer, but it was hard with all the attention his guts were getting. He wiggled under the god's gaze, failing to make ready for words and Mr. Moans. Well, you do not need the answer now if you're not certain. Did not notice a light slowly drain from Aloysius' eyes at that moment? Or did he not? Or did he take no issue with it because it's a fellow monster? He shared that same kind of dark impulses. Perhaps he ignored it because he was looking for a way out. Samuel's dilemma presented him with two options. Should he hide with his fellow Warborns to defend this world's inhabitants? I would make a choice not by been looking for someone to choose for him. Aloysius opinion that third guess was the correct one. Not often taught about fascinating knowledge he required throughout his long life of being a Voidborn. But of all those things, the one that fascinated Aloysius the most was him claiming that the beings in this world were loved, and that he shared that love. Still along the way, Nock had become a human being. In these last few months, Aloysius had explored the depths of monsterhood through him. A monster a human had strapped haunts, creating a bomb that quietly waited for someone to light its fuse. Aloysius got up from bed early that morning. He had dreamt about the strange incident and being on the road with some unknown people. So, the demon user's name is Samuel. And he was given birth. I forgot who they were. They gave birth to Samuel, but they gave birth to Samuel. He had 3 eyes and he was blind. And they threw him into, I think they threw him to a void, or at least, I don't quite remember all the information, but the main point about it is that he created humanity. He created he created Earth and all life on it. It was his creation, and he loved his creations a whole lot, and it looked like the earth is about to fall under the void because I think something had to do with some kind of structural wall that become unstable, in which to the point that the earth will fall into the void and the entire world and all life on it will be destroyed. So it's not mentioned. Samuel wouldn't be very happy with the demise of his creation, his all life on Earth. And I wonder what's ultimately going to happen to Earth, or that it's going to let happen, or it's going to let Earth be destroyed, or is Samuel going to try to do something to save his creation? So we got to meet Obley again. So in chapter 1, at the very end, when Aloysius was arrested, and afterwards Frank revealed his real true identity as Obley, I thought that Frank stopped with his role he was doing. I thought he stopped to the point that, how to say this. Basically, what I thought is that Aloysius I thought Alois thought Frank was an actual person and not a descendant, and that it wasn't until after Alois was dragged away by the police that Frank revealed his real identity. But actually, Frank always sold his identity to Alois, like, not long after they first met. So, in chapter 1, Alois already knew that Frank was really posing as a descendant. I mean, Frank was really a descendant, that Obel was posing as a monk named Frank. So, I believe Obel is part of this. Is a part of this because he wants to save Nerus from the void. I believe. I think that's why he's participating in it. That would make more sense now. Why we saw him at the start. So this part here, this part of chapter 2, is certainly answering a lot of questions I had in chapter 1. And is there any way any of them could stop the Earth from being destroyed, or do they really care about the Earth being destroyed, or do they care to stop it from happening? I don't know. So the new update announced just came out on Friday. Before I download the new update, I'm going to finish off what's left of this build. Build 10.2, which came out in March of last year, 2022. I'm going to finish what's left of this build. Then, once I'm done, then I'll download the game and I'll begin playing all the new stuff from there. Now, once I play the new update, it'll probably be a long time still until the creator comes out with new content towards the story, because he's working on other things, and plus I think he's been in some pain, with writing. So there's a lot of reading in this game, and a lot of dialogue. So with this much reading, it can certainly hurt your hands, or the writing or the typing. So, this chapter is really answering a lot of questions that I had from chapter 1. And as we continue into chapter 2, certainly a lot more questions will be answered. I hope Obel gets to be reunited with Nerus again. I hope the Earth doesn't get destroyed. I hope Samael, I feel bad for Samael. I hope he tries to do something to save his creation, if it's even possible for him to do something to save his creation. So, all information for the game is in the description box below. Thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.